The Galactic Council chamber vibrated with rising tension, the kind that came before declarations of war. Delegates from 37 species filled the amphitheater, their eyes fixed on the central platform where indictments were read aloud in a dozen languages. At the heart of it all, one name echoed with growing intensity: Earth. Humanity stood accused of violating Expansion Protocol 17, interfering with developing civilizations, and deploying covert technology beyond its sanctioned sector. Representatives from the Rix Coalition led the charge, their voices sharp with indignation. The charges were severe, enough to warrant embargo, isolation, or even coordinated military action. Among the murmuring assembly, there was no human delegation. Just one man, alone. Ambassador Elias Mercer stepped forward, expression neutral, posture relaxed. He wore no armor, no badge of rank. Only a dark diplomatic uniform with Earth's modest insignia. No guards flanked him. No advisors whispered strategies into his ear. The council speaker, a crystalline being of the Varnu order, demanded a plea. How does Earth respond to these allegations? Elias's reply was almost conversational. Which statute are we accused of breaking, specifically? A hush fell. The question didn't deflect, it demanded accountability. The speaker hesitated. The council wasn't accustomed to being questioned. The Rix delegates surged forward. You tampered with the Delari reclamation zone, deploying nanite stabilizers without council oversight. Your drones repaired ecosystems we had left in natural decline for study. Elias nodded. And did our intervention harm any sentient life? That's irrelevant, barked the delegate. Then I'll take that as a no, Elias replied. His tone never shifted, never rose. Humanity's mandate includes preservation. You may choose stagnation for your own interests. We choose stewardship. A delegate from the Malari swarm bristled. You presume authority you haven't earned. Human. Your species hasn't even been part of this council for a full generation. Elias glanced at the speaker. And yet here I stand, summoned to answer threats of war. That suggests we've made an impression. A ripple moved through the delegates. Disrespect? No. Something else. Calculated composure. Another delegate spoke. You show no fear, Mercer. Not even hesitation. Elias's eyes lingered on the council floor, then returned to the speaker. Fear is useful, but not here. Not now. An election diplomat whispered in his native ultrasonic frequency to his neighbors. He's bluffing. Earth can't withstand unified force. Another corrected him. Then why didn't they bring a fleet? Why send only him? They were asking the wrong questions. Elias let the silence stretch. Earth is not here to threaten or beg, he said evenly. We are here to clarify. If aid to a dying planet is war-worthy, then this council must decide. Is law about justice or control? Murmurs swelled into debate. Some supported sanctions. Others questioned the wisdom of escalating against a species known for unpredictability. A few remembered Sol Prime survival during the Scourge Plague, how humanity quarantined a third of its population with zero council assistance, and emerged stronger. The speaker raised a crystalline limb. Humanity's case will be evaluated. But if your defense is simply to question our authority, Elias interrupted, not rudely, just firmly. No, my defense is truth. I won't insult this council with lies or posturing. You asked for Earth's voice. You have it. It was hard to tell if the room had grown colder or if the silence simply pressed harder on those present. Elias stood, hands at his side, no visible weapon, no projection of force. And yet the air around him seemed heavier than before. The Rix delegate leaned toward the speaker. He plays games with language. He plays nothing, said another. He simply isn't afraid. Unfazed. That was the word they'd use later, in council records, in private strategy sessions, in species-wide forums, trying to dissect this quiet, strange encounter. Unfazed. Not arrogant, not reckless. Measured. Watching. A species that had bled its way to the stars now stood before them, not demanding respect, but offering none in return for hollow threats. Elias clasped his hands behind his back and waited. The council, for the first time in decades, didn't know what to do next. Elias remembered the cold, dry wind of the Altara ceasefire negotiations. He had been 28, standing between two human factions on the brink of mutual annihilation, their cities reduced to rubble by orbital drones. No external help, no council oversight, just one man with a flag of truce and nothing but his voice. He brokered a halt not because he had leverage, but because he understood what it meant to lose everything. He had lived it. At the Academy on Lyra 9, he had been the only human. The others, Havari, Sylvex, Daluan, treated him like a curiosity, an evolutionary fluke with no noble lineage, no psychic ability, no hive mind. He didn't argue. He observed. He studied their mannerisms, the weaknesses they hid behind custom and ritual. They memorized protocols. Elias learned personalities. While they recited thousands of years of diplomatic precedent, he learned to ask the questions they were trained to ignore. He discovered something essential about the council species. They feared emotion, not rage or hatred, those they understood, but sorrow, regret, hope. Such things were unpredictable, dangerous. That made humans dangerous, too. He read every transcript of failed negotiations in the last century. In nearly all of them, emotional restraint was prized, except in human cases where unpredictable compassion or persistence had won the day. What humans lacked in psychic communication or biochemical superiority, they made up for in resilience honed through constant hardship. Elias hadn't been chosen by Earth because he was the loudest or most decorated. He was chosen because he didn't flinch. Because when an asteroid vaporized New Dakar, he was the one who helped organize rescue efforts before the flames cooled. Because when he was taken hostage during the Orion collapse, he talked his captors into surrendering without a shot fired. He survived things that would shatter most beings, and came out quieter, not harder. He once told a Vorth tactician, "Pain doesn't define us. Endurance does." The Vorth had laughed, and then weeks later, privately admitted they found the idea terrifying. In his quarters, Elias had reviewed every possibility before coming to the council. Earth had debated retaliation, escalation, even preemptive strikes. But he advised against it, not because humans couldn't win, because they didn't have to. Victory wasn't always in weapons fired. Sometimes it was in weapons not revealed. The council expected a show of strength, a fleet perhaps, or at least a contingent of war-born humans to posture in formation. Instead, they received silence. One voice, no saber, no shield. Earth's High Command sent a message before he left. A single line, "Do not escalate, but be ready." The kind of phrase that meant more than it said. Elias knew what it implied. The fleet was hidden, cloaked far beyond the diplomatic zone, silent but watching. It would never move unless he said one word. He never planned to say it. He believed in deterrence through understanding. Let them see that a species bred in conflict could choose peace, deliberately, consciously, not as a sign of weakness, but power under control. That was the lesson most of the galaxy hadn't learned. Most had risen through genetic engineering, castability, or long-term consensus evolution. Humanity? Trial by fire. Endlessly. He wasn't fearless. He just didn't see fear as a reason to stop. He remembered standing beside his father's hospital bed as Earth's last synthetic plague burned through coastal cities. No cure, no promise of one. His father whispered, "You hold until it passes." That's all we do. And they did. Earth always did. Elias brought that history into every word he spoke before the council. They didn't see it because they didn't know what humans had endured just to survive their own world. Floods, wars, collapse, rebirth. Again and again. What the council called unpredictability, humans called experience. What the council feared as volatility, humans understood as adaptation. Diplomatic profiles of humans often noted their emotional spectrum as dangerously wide. Elias once laughed at that. "You fear our depth because you only skim your own." That was why he didn't raise his voice during accusations. Why he didn't counter-threaten. Because true control wasn't silence or volume. It was intent. And his intent had never been to win the council's approval. It was to remind them that humanity didn't need it. He didn't come to appease. He came to clarify. Earth would not apologize for helping a planet heal. It would not retreat from ethical action simply because others found it inconvenient. And it would not be drawn into a war based on fear or arrogance. He stood alone because one human was enough. That was the lesson. The story Earth wanted the galaxy to remember. The Council reconvened, not to deliberate in private, but to challenge Elias directly. They expected him to break under the weight of open confrontation. Instead, he waited calmly as accusations began anew. This time more precise, sharper, each word chosen to provoke. The Rick's delegate opened with data leaks, claiming Earth's involvement in destabilizing minor trade worlds. The Daluan followed, citing unauthorized AI advisors given to developing colonies. Elias listened without interruption. When they finished, he asked a single question. How many of those colonies requested our help? The chamber hesitated. The answer was obvious. Most of them had. Quietly, desperately. The Council had ignored their pleas to preserve neutrality zones. Earth had answered, and in doing so, exposed the Council's passivity. He began pointing out inconsistencies. Molari trade regulations bar biointervention, yet you allow selective harvesting of pre-sentient species. Vorth monitors sanctioned resource strip mining as development assistance. And you accuse us of overreach. Delegates bristled. He continued, voice steady. Earth's policy has been consistent. Aid when asked, intervene when the alternative is collapse. If that offends your sensibilities, revise your standards. But don't pretend neutrality is the same as morality. Several minor members shifted in their seats. A few had received Earth's help and remained silent until now. Elias didn't name them. He didn't need to. The silence was its own acknowledgement. He turned to the most vocal accuser, Counselor Jurek of the Ricks. You cited the Delari incident. We have evidence you attempted to steer the Delari development for exclusive mining rights. We intercepted your transmissions. Would you like them read aloud? Jurek's mandibles clicked, not in denial, but in restrained fury. He didn't refute it. Elias didn't smile, didn't gloat. He let the moment stretch, the tension do the work. Humanity didn't act for profit. We acted because you wouldn't. The Council's speaker intervened, tried to reassert control. Elias addressed him with the same calm tone. You summoned us here under threat of war. I'm here to respond to that. But let me be clear. Earth won't fire first. We don't want this war. But if it comes, we won't lose it either. A few scoffed. Others frowned. But no one laughed. That mattered. He spoke of the siege of Vega, 4, where human colonies held a 2-year line with limited supplies and no reinforcements. Of the biodefense of Arkan's Reach, where human engineers adapted alien DNA within weeks to develop an antidote. He spoke of endurance, not conquest. Of survival, not expansion. What you mistake as defiance, Elias said, is determination. We don't move because you threaten. We move when it's right. Then he paused deliberately. Your fear isn't of our weapons. It's of the fact that we don't show them until it's already too late to stop us. Murmurs turned into unease. The psychological balance had shifted. Elias hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made demands. But he had done something worse for them. He had made them doubt themselves. A representative from the Trilari Confederation, a race known for long neutrality, spoke. Earth's response shows restraint, rare among young species, perhaps too rare to ignore. Another, from the minor Elvari circle, added, You didn't deny your actions. You explained them. No evasion, no distortion. Jurek tried to rally opposition, invoking unity and tradition. Elias cut in, once again disarming through simplicity. Tradition doesn't excuse failure. And unity built on silence isn't unity. It's fear. The speaker attempted to conclude with procedural motion. Elias raised a hand, subtly, and said, Let's not pretend a formal vote changes the truth. You called for judgment. But what you're seeing is not judgment. It's exposure. That word lingered. He closed with a suggestion, framed as a favor. I recommend investigation. Public. Transparent. Not because we fear outcome, but because the galaxy deserves to see who acted and who looked away. The Council did not agree openly, But the momentum shifted. Sanctions were paused. War postponed. A committee would be formed. Investigations authorized. But the real outcome was not in paperwork. The real outcome was in the way counselors avoided eye contact with Elias, in how they hesitated before speaking again, in how no one, not even Jurek, dared to demand his removal. Elias left the chamber without ceremony. He had done what he came to do, not win, not persuade, but to remind the galaxy of a simple truth: Earth didn't seek conflict. It simply wouldn't avoid it when conscience demanded action. And if a single voice could turn the tide, then perhaps the galaxy wasn't ready to see what would happen if Earth ever decided to shout. 3 cycles had passed since the confrontation in the council chamber. No fleets moved. No sanctions fell. The committee tasked with investigating Earth's conduct released an interim report. Technical, inconclusive, and strategically silent. The accusations remained unresolved, but momentum had shifted. The council's posture changed from condemnation to quiet reconsideration, not because the evidence had cleared Earth, but because Elias Mercer had made them rethink the cost of pressing further. Behind closed doors, council factions debated next steps. The military blocs wanted containment. The economic unions saw an opportunity. The neutral zones, the forgotten systems Earth had helped, began voicing support. Not loud, not coordinated, but enough to be noticed. Elias never called them allies. Earth hadn't asked for loyalty. It hadn't even asked for thanks. The records of the council meeting circulated across networks, translated, dissected, analyzed. In them, there were no threats, no ultimatums. Only one man's measured defiance, wrapped in calm logic and unshaken confidence. Entire think tanks were assembled just to understand how Earth had managed to destabilize the most powerful coalition in known space with a single voice and no violence. Elias never returned to Earth. He moved between listening posts, research stations, and fledgling outposts where humans worked beside species still skeptical but increasingly curious. He wasn't a diplomat anymore, not officially, but his presence became symbolic, an envoy without office. A reminder, human colonies that had been sidelined were now consulted, not because of entitlement, but because of proven relevance. Earth's voice grew, not in volume, but in weight. What it said mattered because it had shown what it wouldn't do. It wouldn't yield to fear. It wouldn't abandon its principles for acceptance. Some called it arrogance, others discipline. Humanity didn't rise through superiority. It rose because every generation had to survive something the last could barely comprehend. Wars, collapse, scarcity, extinction events. Each left marks not just on Earth's body, but on its thinking. They didn't seek utopia. They aimed for durability. Systems that could fail and rebuild. Structures that could bend without breaking. And it showed in the way their settlements endured where others folded, in how they responded faster to crisis, adapted quicker, pushed harder, not with reckless energy, but with relentless will. Elias once summarized it in a message to a junior diplomat. We don't go looking for battles, but if someone insists, we don't blink. That became a kind of mantra repeated in military academies and council strategy sessions alike. Analysts began rewriting their assumptions. Humanity wasn't just unpredictable. It was unmoved by fear-based diplomacy. They couldn't be threatened out of conviction, and that made them uniquely dangerous, not because they sought control, but because they couldn't be easily controlled. The Council's collective psyche began to shift. Caution replaced condemnation. Old assumptions unraveled. The idea that younger species must wait, must prove themselves by obedience, began to weaken. If Earth could stand alone and not collapse, maybe others could too. And Elias? He remained the same. No promotion, no statue, no ceremony. He turned down leadership offers, declined interviews. He believed his work was done the moment the council hesitated. That single pause was the seed of everything to come. Historians would later debate whether it was a moment of transformation or the beginning of prolonged instability. Some argued Elias delayed an inevitable war. Others believed he prevented it entirely by forcing reflection. But everyone agreed on one point. He had changed the dynamic. Before Elias, Earth had been a volatile newcomer. After him, it was a factor. He never wrote a memoir. But in his final message to the diplomatic corps, archived quietly in Earth's records, he left a single line. We were never trying to prove we belonged. We just stopped asking. That, more than any fleet or treaty, was the legacy. A species no longer waiting for permission. One that moved forward on its own terms, inviting others to join, but not waiting if they didn't. And in the power centers of the galaxy, where strategy had long relied on fear, that was the most unsettling development of all.